All right, and with that, thank you so much. It is 10:02, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting. Welcome to the May 22nd meeting of the DRCOG Crash Data Consortium. My name is Eric Broughton, Senior Safety Planner here, one of the Senior Safety Planners here at the Denver Regional Council of Governments. And we have a pretty packed agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Preview of what we'll be discussing. I think we have more folks here than to be able to go around and do everyone introduce yourselves. So if you would, please put your name and your organization affiliation in the chat, just so as we go through, people know who is here. And if you ask any questions, just please identify your organization first, so the speakers know who they're talking to. I'm going to go over a summary of the February 20th workshop that we did as a group here in office at the DRCOG office. Kind of going over the strategies, the top strategies were identified and some of the challenges or opportunities identified there. We're going to have a presentation on the update schedule for our dashboard. We'll be learning a bit and seeing a preview of the in-development crash reporting interface from the Department of Transportation. And we're going to get a walkthrough of Texas system, both their crash reporting and their public interface for displaying this data, just kind of show some different ways that this is done. As always, we'll do a quick little crash update and roundtable if anyone has anything to share, and we'll plan our next meeting for September 25th. Before I get too far, I just want to say I've had a cold for the last 2 weeks and I feel much better, but if I struggle a little bit, please bear with me. I've got a glass of water here, but thankfully we have a lot of great presentations and it won't be me speaking for an hour and a half.
Good for you, smart lady.
Just to get started, since there's always people who, it's maybe the first meeting, DRCOG is the Denver Regional Council of Governments. We serve multiple roles in the area, largely setting around transportation, personal mobility, growth and development, and aging disability resources, fitting under our roles as the Regional Planning Commission, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Denver region, and the Area Agency on Aging for most of the region.
Yes.
I just want to just show this. We do cover about a little bit more than 9 full counties in the Denver region. And we do comprise about 60% of Colorado's population. So that's why I really think that there's opportunity here to, if we can improve how crash data is collected, managed, and processed in the Denver region, that can hopefully have trickle effects across the entire state. Okay. And getting into our summary for the workshop, just a really quick background on the consortium. Many of you know this, but this project was kicked off originally in 2022 as part of federal fiscal year 2023 through 405C traffic records improvement grants from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. These 2 grants really had the goal of investigating and demonstrating the value of a regional crash data consortium to inventory the needs of the region, and then working to identify and address common issues with crash data collection, processing, and analysis. During those 2 years, we did numbers of surveys and interviews with transportation planners, traffic engineers, JS specialists, law enforcement agencies, and others to really learn about how data is collected, used, what's working well, what's not working well in the current systems. So we did achieve those goals of investigating and demonstrating the value of this group, published this inventory, needs assessments, and final report. And we're now in an implementation period of taking these recommendations and working to build this out. We have continued this program as part of our Regional Vision Zero work at DRCOG, and we plan to keep going this forward, not under this 405C grant funding though. So on February 20th, we did have an in-person workshop where, excuse me one moment. Okay, there's a little bit of feedback. I think somebody's mic is on. So if your mic is on, if you could please mute it, that would be great. Thank you. So on the 20th, we had an in-person workshop at the DRCOG office. We had 28 participants who rotated between stations centered around the main recommendations of the final report. And among those represented were, again, local governments, both planners, engineers. We had some representatives from the Colorado Department of Transportation, Department of Revenue, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environments, and several law enforcement agencies, and several of our local advocacy and vendor organizations who have been a part of this process. We took all of the strategies that had been laid out in the report and really wanted to ask, how should we prioritize these? What mattered the most to when your views of, again, the goals of improving crash data collection, processing, and analysis? Who should be involved in working on towards these, and what barriers exist? As the participants went around the room, they were, again, presented with these boards with the different areas, able to leave sticky notes with their ideas, and also to leave little dots kind of as a votes to indicate which was their highest priority. And of the 38 strategies identified, 3 really stood out at the top of the list with the most number of, both with the most number of the sticky note dots, but also just kind of the comments and the conversations that were being held around the room. First and foremost was really looking to require many of those fields that are critical to crash data analysts, both at the Department of Transportation and at local governments, to require more fields such as the harmful event consequence, location, latitude and longitude, vehicle movements, vehicle direction, the road location, and description. Many of these are not, or none of these are actually required. Many of them are filled out, and many organizations, many law enforcement agencies are doing a good job, but there is a lot of inconsistency in how they're completed. Some agencies are preferencing one form of location over another when really they should be doing both. So some sort of controls around that is what the clearest desire among those at the workshop. I should also mention there was an online mural board that we created for those who weren't able to attend, and we did receive some comments there, and they were brought into the analysis. The second highest ranked thing was really working to encourage, again, law enforcement agencies and their records management system providers, the Department of Revenue and Transportation, to enhance these required fields, and not just requiring them, but the validations behind them. So when the data is transmitted to Department of Revenue, if there are issues with it, if there's data, things are missing or things aren't coming in the right way, to be able to try to have different validations created to catch those and be able to work with the agencies to earlier on than later on when it's at CDOT and a lot of individual attention is being done to treat in each record. And the third highest ranked and commented was around researching and consolidating statewide crash reporting into a single application. We've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement to hear about some of the things that they would like to see in the software that they use. Most are using electronic systems and submitting electronically. But there's a wide range of options for that, how they are filling out the report, how their software walks them through the reports. And so we've heard things such as conditional formatting would be good, drop-down menus instead of needing to know a code or referencing a manual, autofilling information such as occupants or non-occupants when it's people of the same household. Things like that to really expedite the process and hopefully introduce less errors into the data going to the state. There were a few more that were the next highest ranked ones. These were all kind of tied, roughly the same, 4 and 5. So I wanted to include them all. And the top 2 here are really encouraging some of this law enforcement collaboration that is already existing between agencies and staff as planners and engineers. There's more cities and counties that are doing this than just those listed here. One, for example, like Littleton is another example of a municipality in the region who is doing this sort of work. But we've heard that there's a lot of great success coming out of these meetings and happen whether they're bi-monthly or every month or every other month type of thing. and really continuing the education and training on why that latitude and longitude is so important. That's something that really takes a lot of time for the states and for us and many of our locals who work with their crash data to make sure that that information is available for analysis. The next batch were sort of different. One is kind of a latitude and longitude. That's, again, really working to require that along with the location reporting method. It's slightly different than the first one I talked about because the way that the crash report is, there's an option to put the location in as like an address, not really address, but block or mile marker and lat long. And it's really important that both the lat long and one of the other two options are there so that when CDOT and others are coding it, they can cross-reference those and have a more confidence in those values. Training was asked about and important. So how to use the state and regional data. The state traffic records advisory committee did create a series of training videos over the last few years that are very short, 2 to 3 minutes long, that or 1 to 2 minutes long, that cover some of the most important fields on the report. And so I'll drop a link to that here in the chat once I'm done speaking, but that's kind of a great resource out there and definitely looking to see how we can build on that. And then the last one I want to touch on is coordinating with the consortium to determine if a regional license to a software vendor for the crash data is desired, and if so, kind of embarking on a competitive process to hire a vendor. So this could be a way to simplify the analysis, to streamline the analysis. There's certainly going to be different goals done in different organizations, but if there's a platform or something that can be used for some of those more in-depth analysis, that's something that seems to be a desire. So we're going to look into that. Some of the common barriers we heard that, especially among these top 5 categories, but really throughout the rest of the strategies addressed, come down to the technology, training costs, and some of the existing institutions that we have. One of the when it comes to technology, there really are different technological solutions being used by agencies, and it's both when it comes to the software that they're using, so the individual records management systems, the applications they may be using to fill out the report, which feeds into the records management system, and the hardware that they are using to collect this. So whether that means they have something they can use on in a squad car to collect a GPS location, or if they're checking that on a mobile device. Some of these are quite different and vary between agencies. We've heard that the current technology used doesn't always accurately collect the location, and so it can be off by 15, 30 feet or more. And there may be ways that, and if someone is using just a phone and using a free source to get the latitude and longitude, they might be required to manually key that into the report, which introduces some opportunities for transposing values or just incorrectly entering anything. So we want to make sure that the systems that are being used are accurately collecting that data. And one of the last bit with technology is integrating these systems, connecting them, building the APIs and bridges between networks can be complicated and expensive. One of the second highest barriers was about training. So again, the training that's available related to the DR 3447, which is the crash report in the state of Colorado. We've heard that some folks are still unsure what kind of training is available for different roles. So whether that's how a planner engineers can interpret it for law enforcement, not just those who would, excuse me, sorry, not just those who would be filling out the report, but those who would be reviewing it. So we want to make sure that those are available. Staffing is a big concern, and that's any organization, of course, deals with this. A lot of the cases with law enforcement particularly is with promotions or retirements. So people who know the form inside and out, have been working with it for 5 years, and they've earned a well-deserved retirement, and whoever replaces them may not have that same experience. There's still an inconsistency around, especially the narrative, how it's filled out, and other aspects of the report. And we have heard that some agencies, I'm not sure how many in the DRCOG region, but definitely some in the state, have not been receptive to CDOT when it comes to addressing data quality. And sometimes that's even just connecting with the right people. So that's something that we are working on and with CDOT as well to connect with law enforcement agencies and make sure that we have contacts who can help us with this. When it comes to cost, Drives is a system at the state of Colorado where all this kind of comes together. It's ran by Department of Revenue, and any changes that is likely to be very expensive. So that's something that we want to keep in mind with what we can propose. And the cost, of course, not only relates to the price point in dollars, but also time and staff resources it would take to either develop new software or license new software or make some of these changes. And one note I wanted to make here, when it comes to that aforementioned strategy with competitive process, one said was cannot equal low cost. And I just want to note that if we were to go down a route of selecting some sort of software vendor for the region to analyze or collect data, we would almost certainly do it as a RFP. And so that would be a process that is not necessarily we don't have a policy to select the lowest bid. So we would want to we'd be going for what addresses the quality, what addresses the issue we're trying to solve, and what gets us to the end state we want to be. Existing institutions was kind of the last major or common theme we heard. Some of these things that have been proposed may require legislative changes. And so we're kind of working to identify that, what statutes there are that would need that sort of change, and how we could go about addressing that if that's the route we decide to go down. Drives, the program I mentioned earlier, it is in a code freeze until at least 2026. And so any changes to that or any proposed changes to that really can't be done now, except for potentially setting us up to propose some changes once that freeze is complete. There's many legacy systems that are being used by different agencies, not only at the state, but with the law enforcement agencies. So there may be long-term contracts with records management systems. There may be existing systems that are very integrated with other things. And so making sure that if there's something that's built that we can work in there, it interacts with those well. Home rule was identified by multiple participants and basically saying that like it'd be difficult for the state to require certain things to be done. And so for this, I really think there's opportunity to just try to create something that would be so good and free, hopefully, that agencies would elect to use it if there's not a way to require it. And then finally, for the existing institutions, personally identifiable information was called out as something that is important to always keep in mind, and how the law is regulating that deals with this data. Just three last things I want to identify here that I thought were really important. First and foremost, besides these common barriers, was officer safety. That is something that we definitely want to keep front and center when we're talking about how to fill out this report. We don't want to have a system where maybe officers are putting a puck in the middle of the road to collect something. We want officers and troopers to be safe when they're filling out the report. And so if there's other solutions that can do this, that's definitely something we want to pursue. Also heard that in various ways that the crash report is too long. It collects a lot of really important and useful information, but there's definitely the potential for, there may be ways to streamline it in future iterations. And we would need to think through how these different systems interact with each other in a future system, because it would likely be, there's a large potential for increased complexity with whatever we may do. Getting on to the top folks who were identified as who should be involved in this, probably unsurprisingly, everyone here. So the Colorado Department of Transportation, the team there working on crash data is integral to doing a lot of this data work. The Colorado Department of Revenue, they are the custodian of data. So working with the Department of Revenue to make sure changes are done appropriately. Law enforcement agencies themselves who collect the data, making sure that we're hearing from them and the things that they would like to integrate into their systems work with the other systems they have. Local governments, this is where the law enforcement and local government relationship is really important, and I think a large part of where progress can be made, because if we are trying to work with law enforcement agencies, sometimes, again, we don't have the right contact. It's hard to get a hold of the right person. So if agencies have relationships and contacts that they could share information with, that would be really helpful to get out some of this messaging. Policymakers when it comes to any sorts of legislative changes that might need to be made. And then ultimately, or finally, so a lot of the consultants and vendors, and this may include the traffic records coordinator working with the state, some of those people who might be able to help with creating a form or streamlining a form. So there's definitely a lot of folks who could be involved with this, and just looking through the participant list, I see a lot of names that fit in almost all of these categories. So I feel good about that. The last thing I'm going to cover is just some of the next steps. So we will be continuing to go through the feedback from this workshop and kind of sort of streamlining some of the findings from it. We're working to create a survey for law enforcement agencies about some of their records management system needs, the technology they use, the costs especially, and the pros and cons. We've been doing this very ad hoc conversations, and we've had a lot of great conversations with law enforcement already, but hoping to expand the breadth of those we've talked to. Needing to determine what changes would need to be made legislatively, or what could be made at the agency level. And then also determining what steps can be taken concurrently. And many of these things are already being done one way or another. As I mentioned, example of the engagement between local governments and planners, engineers, and their law enforcement agencies. But there are certainly some where there are likely dependencies that exist that we would need to tackle one step or two steps first before moving on to another. And we will be planning to have our next meeting like this in September, September 25th of this year. At that point, we will hopefully be sharing out some more concrete steps that we can take, and again, updating on some of the steps that are being done by partners here. But we also want to mention that if there are anything that you want to talk about or discuss with me or our partners for this, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we're definitely working on these in-between meetings, and we'll always love to hear your feedback on what we're doing and if there's any ideas for other strategies that we could pursue besides those laid out in the report. With that, I'll open up for a few questions if we have it, and if not, we can move on to our next presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, great. Seeing none, I will move on to this update from my colleague Byron Schultz, and I will stop sharing my screen and let him take control.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Let me just get set up here really quick. My slideshow. Right. Okay. Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for giving me the time here, Eric. My name is Byron Schultz. I'm a JS specialist at DRCOG, and I'm here to talk about our plans to update a product that we've created, hopefully that some of you know about, the DRCOG Crash Data Dashboard. And so we, just a little background, this is a web-based product on a browser that you can go in and see a dashboard of the crashes in the region. And we launched this back in September of 2024. We did, if you were part of this group, last summer, we did an input session with the Crash Data Consortium and the Regional Division 0, working group jointly to get some input on what would be important to see in the dashboard and what use you would like to, how you would like to use the dashboard itself. So what I'm going to do here is just a quick demo of the functionality and just a refresher for those of you who may not be familiar with it or may haven't looked at it in a while. So I'll go through the map and filters and some of the other functionality. So I'll drop the link in the chat to this when I'm done talking so you can also explore it, but this is what the dashboard looks like. So the very basic level, there is a map here that when you're zoomed out all the way, it shows a layer of the crash hotspots, just where the crashes are most dense in the region. But then when you zoom in, like I was, then you get down to the actual points of those crash locations. So these are symbolized by mode and severity. And when you're in the top right here, you can open up a legend to get an idea of what you're looking at for any layers that you choose. In addition to crash points, there's also other reference layers that you can turn on and off, including our critical corridors, high injury network, and municipalities, for example. So, but what I want to show here, I guess first, is that you can click on any point to get the information about that crash. And there's kind of different categories, the basic information and the travel modes and all of those things can let you explore that. But what's kind of a cool thing here is that you can filter the points in the map by any of the filters seen on the left here. So for example, if we wanted to, we could look at mode of travel and just find bicycle, scooter, and pedestrian crashes. And then the map will update with those, as well the numbers you see, which I'll get to in a second. So you can see that, yeah, our map is filtered, but then also the charts on the right side are filtered as well. So we're looking at the top intersections by the number of crashes that were in that filter, and then the total crashes and fatalities and serious injuries. And if you go on to other tabs in the dashboard here, we have other themes that you can explore the data by. So this filter is applied, but now you can go to this tab about when these crashes are happening for whatever filter you've set, why they're happening, so the road conditions descriptions, weather conditions, lighting conditions, how, so this is getting into the crash type, which is probably a fairly common use case, the driver actions, vehicle movements, contributing factors, and these can be a many-to-one relationship. There might be multiple vehicles with multiple vehicle movements. Let's keep that in mind. The Who tab, getting into some demographic information about the age of those involved, equity zones in the area, yeah, and then different modes and how those break down. And the vulnerable road users, as would be assumed, is dealing with those non-motorist, pedestrian, bicycle, scooters. So this is just stats based on those alone. So just kind of coming back here, we did have that filter, so I'll just take that filter off. You can reset any of these. So now we're back to everything, all the crashes in the region. A particular functionality that I think is kind of interesting is you can come up here and you can draw an area of interest and filter by that instead of attributes. So if I live on this block, so maybe I want to just look at the crashes that have occurred on my block. And now here it says, okay, well, there's only 2 intersections, but the one that has more crashes is showing at the top. And then you can go through and all the charts are going to be updated based on that. So great. So I think that's kind of a really quick whirlwind tour of the dashboard. I'm just going to show you the About tab here at the very end. This is providing you written instructions and context on all the data and the functionality so that you can also kind of do some self-guided exploration. But with that, I was just going to transition back here. So do this to me again. There we go. So yeah, I will drop the link in the chat so that you can take a deeper dive on any of those things that I was showing. And then this is what's coming next that would be important to retain is we have an update schedule. So we just released this last September, but we didn't plan for it to just be like, this is how it's going to be forever. We want to continue to be receptive to feedback. So right now, what we're doing is doing this refresher for our external stakeholders to just plug the idea that we will be updating it. We'll be seeking feedback, remind you that it's there. We're going to be requesting 2024 crash data from the Department of Transportation soon and processing that. And then in June, July, you can expect a digital survey from us, something simple where you can provide your ideas or feedback on what you would like to see in an update, what's working well, what's not working as well as you'd like. And we'll gather that feedback. We'll gather also internal feedback from DRCOG staff. We'll review all of the ideas that we get and assess what is actually possible given the data, given the software limitations. And we're not planning to just do like a wholesale reconstruction of the dashboard. We're going to change how it is now. So just kind of in scope, we're not going to just roll out a whole new product. It's going to be somewhat similar and recognizable. So yes, we'll plot an update path and figure out the scope of the updates we want to do in June, July, and then September, hopefully by the next meeting of this group, we'll have rolled out the new dashboard, and then we'll have the updated data. So we'll have 2020 to 2024 crash data. So with that, Eric, if there's time for questions, I could take them. Other than that, I can drop the links into the chat.
Thanks, Byron. Yeah, I put the link to the dashboard in the
Okay.
chat already. I think we have time for a question or two
Okay.
if there is one.
Any questions?
Real quick, in the feedback questionnaire, is that going to specifically go out to this group as part of that coalition request, or is it another news group? Just to clarify.
Yeah, good question. Yes, we have a list of the contacts for this group and the Regional Vision Zero working group. So I think those are going to be the two main email lists that we will send that out to. And yeah, I'll work with Eric in case there are other stakeholders that we want to include. Great. Not seeing any other questions. Eric, I can turn it back over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Byron. Now I'd like to turn it over to Alyssa Herron from the Colorado Department of Transportation.
Good morning, everyone. Does that sound okay or does that sound weird?
It sounds great.
Okay, it just sounds weird in my headphones. I think something's up with them. Okay. Like Eric said, my name is Alyssa Herron. I work for the Colorado Department of Transportation. I am the lead traffic safety analyst in the Traffic Safety and Engineering Services branch. I'm going to give you guys a quick tour that will encapsulate a little bit of the validation work that Eric mentioned, how we're going to incorporate that into our crash reporting system that we're offering to any reporting agency that would like to use it, and then also the blotter system. So first of all, a lot of these validations haven't been built into the reporting system yet, just because we haven't gotten to that point yet. But one important one that I can show you is we have this broadside crash here. Oh my gosh, why can't I not spell today? And broadside crashes require it to be at an intersection or like a driveway access, an alley, a railroad crossing, that kind of thing. So one of the validations that I have built in for my contractors is that if this road description says non-intersection, it will flag that and say that a broadside must occur at one of these two places, which is where perpendicular, that's not right. That might be right. Yeah, perpendicular vehicles come together and interact. Another thing on the validations that we like when we talk about like timeliness and accuracy, this one had a driver that was the age of 7. There was nothing in the report that indicated this person was actually 7 years old, but there is no way that we can arbitrarily guess, with a few exceptions. this person was probably born in 2007, but we don't have the ability to verify that information unless we reach out to the agency directly. And sometimes we do. Let's see, when we talk about GPS locations and the accuracy of them, Denver PD is a great example of how these how each agency has their own kind of way of doing it. So Denver PD, their GPS is set by dispatch. So they will be dispatched in this case to I-25 and Bellevue, which is where the GPS lands up because that's assigned by dispatch. But you go through and you open the diagram and you realize that it's at the gore point of the southbound on-ramp. The officers have no opportunity in their reporting, neither do the detectives or anybody else. They have a multi-stage crash process. It's wild how integrated everything is over there. But there's no way for them to update the accuracy of the GPS. So every single DPD record, my team has to manually update. And we focus strictly on interstate highways and state highways. So roads that are managed and operated by CDOT, and then pedestrian crashes, serious injuries, and things like that. So in our new crash reporting system, we're trying to take a lot of that guesswork out of it. So when we start with a new blotter, this will be for early serious injury and fatality notification. I'm not sure how many agencies plan on doing it for serious injuries, but a lot of times those serious injuries end up becoming fatalities. So some agencies want to go ahead and put that data in. One of the ways that we've integrated helpful tools for the agencies is this Find on Map feature. So let's say the crash happened at Colfax and Colorado. And let's say it happened about 200 feet south. And that will automatically populate the GPS coordinates for them in the format that our system can handle, because we work in decimal degrees, not degrees, minutes, seconds, so there won't be any issues with like data conversion and things like that. And this is why we really desire the reiteration of the crash location in the location fields and in the narrative to help us make sure that we have at least 2 points of reference that verify the location. So in that one crash where we had the diagram tells us enough about where the crash occurred because an officer will spend the most time on this piece. In the narrative itself, it didn't say specifically. It just said she disobeyed her lane assignment and merged onto I-25. It doesn't really dictate where that happened. So we're adding in tools to help make this process easier. We've also simplified the blotter for anyone who's familiar with it. We've kind of edited it in a way that is more user-friendly, and the same is true for the crash reporting. So obviously the crash reporting is going to be more complex. And on the main page, you'll have all of your basic crash header information, where the crash occurred, when responders arrived, when they left, if the report is amended, that kind of thing. Then we have a separate tab for the roadway and location information. So all of this will be strictly for the roadway information, and then you can add traffic units and non-vehicles like pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. That way. You'll notice that when I add in a non-motorized traffic unit, the data collected is different. And we hope to, when we get into the final stages of developing this, that we can automate some of those things on the wish list. Like most of the time, people in vehicles are seat belted properly, obeying their licenses. They're not drunk, they're not on drugs, whatever. And so it can auto populate those things, and then the officers can change them as necessary. So like, if passenger 3 wasn't wearing their seatbelt, they could automatically fill in all of the data and then just change that one value instead of having to manually input, I can't even remember how many, all of these values. So, and we do have like a tab operated system. So like you can come in here and like say that they complied with their restrictions. They were not ejected, not ejected. They had their shoulder and lap belt and it was properly used. And so we'll have a button that will automate this for not only the driver, but for the passengers. And that will save a lot of time for the reporting officers. Let me think. I was told to do this quickly. And so I have a bunch of tabs in my brain open, and I don't know if I covered everything that I meant to. I think I did. We're in for the fatal blotter, we are in the phase where we are having some officers submit the data. We're having some issues with their credentials and logging in and how the system generates their user information. So we're working on that right now. I have, I think it's a sergeant from the city of Meade who is trying to get logged onto this and start submitting electronic blotters instead of filling out the current PDF. And also, since a lot of people will be asking about 2024 data, we will be releasing it in a few weeks. I'd say it's about 90-something% complete. Our big thing right now, and if anybody knows anybody at the coroner's office for Adams or Broomfield County, we're still missing their toxicology data, and that's our third largest representative behind DPD and CSP. So we are missing a big chunk of our toxicology data because we haven't been able to get in contact with Adams or Broomfield County. So that will delay the final data, but we'll post what we have in a couple weeks, and hopefully we'll get that toxicology data in. Eric, my brain is going so fast. Did I miss anything? Are there questions?
Alyssa, could you talk a little bit about the time frame? Did you mention that?
Oh, okay. So time frame. So we will be completing phase 3. Dave, feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, because I never know what fiscal year system we're on. I think it ends October 31st.
End of September.
End of September. Thanks, Dave. And we're hoping to get phase 4 so that we can continue on this side of the development. One of the big hurdles is that the drive system is in a coding freeze, so we can't actually submit to DOR, but we have successfully submitted to the test database for DOR. The blotter doesn't go to DOR, it's just our in-house data. So this one is, I'd say about 80% complete. We just want to make sure that it operates nice and smooth, like, because as we start to scale up from, 2 officers to 200 officers, the usability will change, especially as you get different types of users. And so we want to make sure that we have the time and the development, because it's really just me and our developer doing this back and forth every week for the last, almost 3 years now. And we want to make sure that the system suits a wide variety of people so that when we do introduce the formal crash form, it's basically a test case for a statewide crash data form, singular record management system. Because basically what this will show is that if we have multiple agencies using a single software with built-in validations and built-in support, i.e. me, they will be able to enter data more accurately, more quickly, and with less of a burden on them. And if I can get that case study, it would basically show that, hey, maybe a single RMS and maybe the legislation and the money will be worth it in the end, because this data is, consistent across multiple agencies, and that's one of the biggest things we struggle with, which is why we value like DRCOG so much, because they do the off system, so like the city and county roads, they do the GPS for those, because I don't have the manpower to do that kind of thing. I know I rambled a bit there, sorry. Any other questions? I hope that answered your question, Catherine.
Yeah, so right now you're just doing kind of proof of concept, and do you have law enforcement that do you have people that are helping advise on the system or helping to test it, or is that something
Yeah.
that you will be in need of in the future?
Yeah, so I do have a contact. CSP has been working with us. Trooper Benny has been my primary point of contact with them. He's been the one helping me fill out this thing and tell me, this doesn't feel right. And watching someone who maybe didn't grow up with computers the way I did and like doing the development stuff, watching them use the system is really informative to me. And then that other sergeant out of Meade, and I'll be contacting. I know the city of Lakeside wants to get involved because they have eight people total, or 8 reporting officers. I can't remember which. But yeah, like small and medium agencies with few resources, like I think would be a good target for this. And then any, larger agencies, they probably have their own RMS that they're using. And so they'll be a little bit tougher to kind of recruit over to a system that maybe isn't as sophisticated yet. But yeah, I don't know. My brain is going so fast. Any other questions for me? And you guys are welcome to email me. If you go to, let's see, Crash. You can find my information here, or my boss if you have comments, concerns, complaints about my rambling. Yeah, and we'll be updating the data here soon in a couple weeks. So. On the validation, on the broadside collisions are validated based on whether or not the crash is recorded on an intersection. My question would be for multi-lane segment where a motorcycle may be in a no zone blind spot to a truck that happens to change lanes. So they would still connect front to side, but because they were, it seems, parallel in that situation, it would be considered a side swipe. Definitely correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have a particular crash you want assistance on, definitely feel free to send me an email and we can chat about it. Thanks, everyone.
That's great. Is there any other last questions for Alyssa? All right, so I'm not seeing any more in the chat or hands up. So thank you so much for that. Always great to hear from CDOT and know what's going on there. And now I'd like to introduce Catherine Rush. She's a senior safety planner here at DRCOG, newest member of our team, and she'll be going over some lessons from the state of Texas.
All right, thanks, Eric. So for some reason, it's always a little clunky for me to do PowerPoint in Teams. So let me know if you're not able to see the main slides. Does that show up okay, Eric?
Yep, it's looking great.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the, just give a quick overview of the state of Texas crash records information system. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background. So before joining DRCOG about 2 months ago, I spent 10 years working as a transportation planner in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. It was first with regional government there, and then with the city of Dallas. And I didn't realize until I moved here that I took for granted how easy it is to access what I think is largely high quality data until I moved here. So now I'm not an expert on the Texas systems, and I did not develop them. I wasn't involved in the development of them. So a lot of the history I'll be presenting here was actually new to me when I was preparing this presentation, saying how the Texas system came to be. So my objective with this presentation is to show you the benefits and the world of the possible when most law enforcement agencies are using a single statewide system to enter and report on crashes, and to try to convince you that we should take this up here in Colorado and move what Alyssa showed on more quickly. So I'm not trying to convince you of Texas's exact system because it's not perfect. It'll merely be used as an example. So first, to give an overview of the presentation, I'm going to quickly provide some background context, an overview of Texas law, and a history of the systems, an overview of the systems, and then what you can get by having this statewide system, and that's a demonstration of the query tool. So for some context, Eric and I are on the advisory groups for many or most of the local safety action plans in the region, and crash data challenges come up in most of them. So typical complaints that we hear are about timeliness, so it can take years to get data. Accessibility, the data can be difficult to get. It could be, once you get it, it can be difficult to understand and to use. In terms of completeness, some cities are missing most fields, like they only send a couple fields to the state. Most cities are missing some fields. In terms of uniformity, this can be, there's a lot to unpack here. So for example, there are spelling errors, issues with latitude, longitude, so like sometimes the negative is missing, issues with time formatting. So I've heard that there was a major city in Texas that didn't have any crashes after noon because they weren't sending data to the state in military time. There's differences in reporting on drunk and impaired driving. So for example, State Highway Patrol has different fields for that are not received by DOR and CDOT, so they have different data. Crash reports in drives don't match CDOT's data because CDOT does some cleaning to make up for those missing fields. In terms of accuracy, records are containing factual errors, which, you know, that can happen in Texas too. There's also issues when dispatch, kind of what Alyssa mentioned, when dispatch is used to auto-populate latitude and longitude, because while dispatch, you know, it sends people to the rough approximation of a location, it's often not exactly correct. And then integration. So CDOT sometimes gets duplicate data dumps, interfaces with local systems can create errors. So there's a lot going on here. Significant resources are spent at pretty much every level of government in Colorado to create usable data. So I've heard that there's about 7 people at the Department of Revenue whose sole job it is to enter paper crash report forms. CDOT has to clean data, DRCOG has to clean data, many local governments have to clean data, there are third-party vendors, so it's just a very expensive system. And so again, I am not saying that Texas' system is perfect, and I am not trying to cast blame or anything like that. I'm just trying to lay out what I've heard as challenges and facts on the ground, and what are some potential lessons learned that I've seen from Texas. Okay, why aren't we moving? Okay, there we go. So we have to start at the foundation of the law because that helps inform a lot of what the system is. Now, Texas is not a home rule state, so that can be a separate conversation. Although I'm still a little bit, I have a lot of questions about how much that impacts this or not. But so Texas is, or TxDOT is the custodian of crash records in Texas, and that was not always the case. The Texas Transportation Code sets the laws around crash reports, and it says that law enforcement must investigate crashes valuing $1,000 or more and submit a report electronically to TxDOT the day after the crash. So as I'll get into in the next slide, electronically was not always in the code. The crash report form must be approved by TxDOT and the Department of Public Safety, and law enforcement shall report on the form and disclose all information required unless the information is not available. So information in the crash reports is for collision prevention purposes for all levels of government. The section also describes when redacted reports can be released for a fee and what personal information must be redacted. It describes when and how changes can be made to crash reports by someone other than the officer. And so, as I mentioned previously, that kind of gets at the issue with data in drives, the kind of the middle system being different than what CDOT's data is because it doesn't have any cleaning. It can have a lot of missing fields. And so this basically legalizes the extent to which data can be cleaned. It notes that it cannot alter the material fact, however, of the crash. So for example, what Alyssa mentioned about maybe sometimes a crash has been incorrectly reported as broadside based on the narrative of the diagram, correcting that, things like that. It also requires coroners to submit reports to TxDOT when there's a death from a traffic collision and to include the toxicology results. So to provide some history about how Texas got to this system. So in 2010, TxDOT became the custodian of the crash data. So sort of essentially what the Department of Revenue is in Colorado. In 2014, the state's online crash reporting system, so sort of their version of what Alyssa presented, which is called Crash, launched. And then also at the same time, submission services was created, and it allows agencies with a third-party vendor to submit reports electronically. However, they must have a web services client and adhere to 800 plus business rules. The query tool will help demonstrate why all of that's necessary in order to make the query tool work. So by June 2016, 88% of crash records were received electronically. So within just a couple of years, half of crash records were received via Crash. And then I think about another 20 to 30% were received by submission services, and then about 12% paper forms. In 2017, the bill requiring crash reports to be submitted electronically passed, but there's a provision in the bill that it would not take effect until 2019. According to the bill analysis that went with it, it was intended to redirect costs from processing paper reports to traffic safety projects. They estimated that it would save over $1 million annually. And by 2019, most law enforcement agencies, including City of Dallas, had switched to using Crash. So now I want to provide an overview of how the systems fit together. So we have the kind of input systems, which is Crash, the crash record submittal system. Then we also have the submission services for third-party vendors. The coroner's reports, of course, go into it. All of that is collected into the state's crash data warehouse, which is called CRIS, the Crash Records Information System. From there, there's a little bit of validation, verification, a little bit of cleaning that goes into it, and then data is either sent back to, then data is made available in a number of ways. So for example, it's sent back to the agency's CRIS or crash systems so that they can download the crash reports. There's also, I mentioned the CRIS query tool that is public that I will be demonstrating. There are dashboards and annual reports similar to what CDOT has. There's an extract interface site if people want to do bulk downloads. And then they also offer API connections for governments. So the City of Dallas had an API connection that allowed us to create our own internal and public facing dashboards, as well as we were able to then download the data, do a little bit of additional cleaning. So really clean up any of those final crashes that didn't have latitude and longitude, which were still, it was very, very small number at that point, but just, I think we had about one person that spent part of their time doing a little bit of additional cleaning for us. So now I'm going to talk about Crash. And so it is a free, secure, web-based application within the CRIS system, where law enforcement officers enter crash reports. Users and agencies can create templates and defaults to have certain fields pre-populated, so they don't have to fill them in every time. So they can have the agency name, the city officer name, officer ID, things like that pre-populated. The agency can also, or the officer can create diagram templates, so they don't have to create new diagrams every time. It allows the agency to customize the approval process. So in addition to the original officer, there can be up to 2 levels of additional approvals. They have a system, as you can kind of see here, for alerts and notifications, so alerting investigators or supervisors if they need to approve a crash report, notifications if a crash report is rejected. officers can go back and look at their, kind of draft reports that haven't been submitted yet, or look at their previously submitted reports. So now a little bit about what it would look like if an officer went to go and submit a report. And again, I don't have access to it anymore, so I was just taking off of examples that I found online. But a couple things to note is that the system is integrated with the state's driver's license and vehicle registration systems. So when the officer goes in, all they need to do is put in the VIN number and the person's ID number, and it'll auto-populate a lot of fields. So, for example, the person's like ethnicity, name, the vehicle information, all of that sort of thing. So, really cutting down on the time it takes for officers to fill out these reports. Again, I mentioned there's a crash diagramming tool. It has a lot of drop-down menus and autofill and spell check to really cut down on issues with data quality. A lot of required fields are bolded, so it's very clear about what has to be filled out. It's mobile friendly and touchscreen capable, so if officers have like tablet systems instead. Also, agencies can add up to 5 custom fields. One thing that's notable about Colorado is that we don't have a kind of a true sort of contributing factor field. There's sort of behavioral ones, but not overall. And I've heard that some agencies want that or want other custom fields. And so that is, an option here. And then also before going to submit, there's a validation step. So you can kind of see, you sort of can click through these modules as you go through the crash report. So starting with overall and then going to the unit and persons, factors and conditions, narrative diagram. And then before submitting, there's a validate, and it'll show you any critical errors that need to be addressed, as well as some additional errors. And by clicking through them, you can kind of walk through and correct those errors. Whoops. All right, so now talking about some of the benefits. So first of all, law enforcement spends less time completing reports. I don't know what the average is here, but at least according to this 2017 presentation, 90% of reports were completed in 10 to 15 minutes in Texas. It's a lot lower cost to process reports, so it costs about $2 for electronic reports versus $11 for paper reports. By having this statewide system, there's timely delivery of crash data. So some cities that already have their own third-party vendors might not have as much of an issue with this, but for example, the state, the region, counties, if jurisdictions are still relying on paper reports, it can take a lot of time to get data. So 20 days just from when paper reports are submitted. Also, the data is returned to the agency and made available to them very quickly. So in the CRIS tool, I could see a crash that happened a week ago, if depending on how severe it was and if it, required very much investigation or not, if it had been submitted and didn't require much cleaning. There is no back and forth between the state and local agencies to fix reports, which I know happens a lot here. So improvements can be made to the crash report form more frequently without major disruptions. I think the last time the CDOT form was changed, it took years to finally get all agencies on board. TxDOT made improvements to the crash form in 2015, 2017, 2018, 2023, and I didn't even know it. It was just really minor improvements that just kept everything flowing smoothly. More fields are filled out. There's improved data accuracy because of the auto population of fields. And then one thing that I think doesn't get enough attention is that engineers and planners can access crash data from all law enforcement agencies operating in their jurisdiction or adjacent to their jurisdiction. So right now, a lot of, if crashes are on the boundary of a jurisdiction, the local, the engineers and planners may only be seeing half the picture because they're only getting half of the police reports. I think in the city of Dallas, about 10% of our fatal and severe injury crashes, the reports were not completed by Dallas Police Department. And so if we didn't have that data from all law enforcement agencies, we would not be getting the full picture. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly, let me see about time. Okay, go through this CRIS query tool. This is intended to show what you get by having this statewide system and everybody on the same page. So this tool is publicly available and it allows you to query, extract, or analyze publicly available crash data. So it does not have, people's names, it doesn't have their addresses, etc. The results can be extracted in a ton of different ways. The tool does not provide access to narratives and diagrams. And so if we wanted those, to delve deeper into a crash cause, we would go into Crash System and download it that way. But there's a whole lot of steps you have to go through in order for just your regular government staff to get access to the Crash System. So here's the URL. And then once you're on this page, you'll click on this Create New Query Builder. I'm going to exit out of this and go to the demonstration. Before I do, I'm going to provide two examples. So one is, let's say I wanted to do a citywide analysis, identify where speeding related crashes are happening the most. If I wanted to prioritize where I wanted to do traffic calming or do speed related enforcement. And then another one is going to be a project specific example. So let's say we implemented a project. We wanted to see what the changes in the crash count had been. Oh, okay. So I'm going to exit out of this really fast and pull up Chris. All right. Can everybody, Eric, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
And
great.
do you want to wait for questions to the end, or if someone has one at this point, would you take one?
Yeah, I would take one.
Okay, looks like Crystal has her hand up.
So question I have is, how does this tie to driver records when there needs to be like a suspension or revocation of a driving privilege as a result of the crash? How is that information shared with the Division of Motor Vehicle there in Texas so that additional action can be taken against those drivers?
Yeah, so similar to the way that the driver records feed into the crash system, it goes the other way as well. So you can set up, I don't know all of the exact terminology for all of this, but like, AP connections, things like that, for then the crash report and notifications to go to a system on the driver record side that alerts people if a suspension needs to happen. Which is my understanding how it works in drives today is that if a crash comes in, there's a flag that comes up that could alert folks of if additional action related to driver privileges needs to be taken. All right, so I'll dive into this and then I'd love to get more questions once I'm done. So I'm going to go to create a new query. And again, this is just to show all of the data that is available at our fingertips. If we're all using kind of one system, it all connects really well. So disclaimer, okay. And so I would use this tool if I wanted to get data quickly. We had our own also data in-house that had, we would connect signalized intersection or intersection name data to, so then we could easily prioritize and pull up the list of like highest injury, signalized intersections, or it had the additional cleaning. But sometimes, depending on how busy the crash data folks were, if I needed to look at something just really quickly, I would use just this public system. So first, with my first citywide analysis example, I can query crashes by crashes, units, or persons. I think the terms are a little bit different here, but kind of hopefully you'll still be able to follow along. Where you have the overall crash, you have the units within each crash, and then you have the persons within each unit within the crash. So I'm going to do crashes. I'm going to look at crashes over the past 5 years, so range of years. So let's do 2020 to 2024. But I could also do specific data range. Now I'm going to go, you can do county, city, highway, street name. I'm just going to do city and I'm going to do Dallas, but you can see here how once I start typing things, names pop up. I think it's the same in the crash system, so it helps, you know, cut down on errors. I go Dallas, so here I can add some filters. So I did date, time, location, and then filters. So I want to add, I know that we have a field for contributing factor, so I'm going to do contributing factor. If I want to select multiple factors, I'm going to, you know, is equal to, is not equal to, I'm going to do is in. That's how the term for if you want to select multiple factors. And I think it's the same here where you can have speeding related or over speed limit. So I'm going to do both of those, or unsafe speed. So failed to control speed. Let's do unsafe speed, and let's do speeding over limit. All right, save. So far we have 39,000 crashes selected. Let's say I want to just focus in on our fatal severe crashes. So I'm going to add another filter. They have a field for crash severity. So I'm going to do crash severity is in. Let's do suspected serious injury and fatal injury. We're going to go save. This is saying, again, because there's been improvements, some of these factors aren't available for all years. And it kind of gives you a notification of that. So now let's see what our crash count is. I hope this didn't freeze on me. Maybe if I can do this for, okay. I think it did freeze on me. All right, well, that's going to take too much time. So I'm going to delete that and we're just going to view results. So here I have the option of viewing results on a map. I can create a chart or I can create an attribute list that I then extract. So let's do view on a map. This is not the time system. You're making me look bad. Okay, here we go. All right. I swear it doesn't normally do this. Oh, it's probably because there's too many results. Okay. Well, let's do create an attribute list. So here, if I want to just extract all of the data, I can select which field I want to export. So I'm going to select columns and it'll show me all of the different possible fields I can access from the data. So I want to do, let's say, crash date. I want to do contributing factors. I want to do agency, you know, time, street name, there's latitude, longitude. So I can create kind of a custom data set that I then extract. And I'll see here, you can do export by CSV. But for the sake of time, and because it's still thinking about it, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you what it would look like if I wanted to just do a project-specific query. So I'm going to go back to Query Builder and I'm going to start over. I'm going to do crashes. And so for this one, I'm going to show you, we had a project on a 2-mile stretch of Maple Avenue. There's a lot of fatal and severe injury crashes, and I'm curious if any pedestrian or bicycle crashes have happened in the past 6 months since I last looked at the data. So I'm going to do specific date and time. Because I practiced this, it's kind of got it auto-filled for me. So I'm going to do next. I'm going to do search using an interactive map because I could search just Maple Avenue by street, but I only want a portion of Maple Avenue. So I'm going to do this interactive tool to select part of it. So I'm going to draw And I'm just going to do this very roughly and not nearly as precise as I normally would for the sake of time. So I just want this section, save location. All right, there's been 22 crashes on this stretch in just the past 6 months. So I also want to do an additional filter. Let's see. If I just want to see crashes with pedestrians, I could do person type is equal to pedestrian, save. Let's see. There's been 2 crashes. So let's see them on the map. So I think this one has been a severe crash. So I could open up, if I click on it, I can open it up and again, view all of those details. So if I want to see what actually happened here, if somebody disregarding a signal, all of this data. So again, this is just to show that, you know, if everybody is sort of on the same system and the systems are well connected, that it just gives you access to a whole world of data that we might not have otherwise. All right, that concludes my presentation. Let me pull back up my screen. Anybody has any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything in the chat. Oh, as I say that, one comes up. Ben Ramsey.
Thank you, Catherine. I had a quick question on what platform was used to build the dashboard itself.
I do not know the answer to that. I know it's a vendor, but I don't know who. And I will say, from what Eric's already told me, all of your vendors will tell you that Texas's system is terrible. But all of the claims that have made so far, I don't think are true. So I think, yeah, I don't know that vendors will be super happy about this proposal. But I don't know who created this one, or Texas's.
Okay, another question in the chat from Crystal. Any information on what the system cost Texas to implement?
I don't know that. That would have to be a follow-up question for them. Considering they said it saved, you know, I think that $1 million savings was even including the technology. So I don't know how much money it cost, but I know that they saved money on it compared to what they were doing before.
I'll jump in.
Alyssa?
I'll jump in real quick and just say that, you know, it feels like the efforts that we put in to make Colorado's crash data what it is, like, for example, like working with the reporting officers and their different record management systems to make sure the DOR gets the same kind of data to the database, and then my contractors work on cleansing it, and then, you know, DRCOG and others do work on it. It seems like we're spreading the money across agencies to achieve a fraction of what we could achieve if we had a single, you know, singular system that everybody understood how it worked and it was integrated.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm
yeah.
definitely curious about this in the long term.
I do know that Washington is updating their statewide system right now, and I think they're spending about $1.5 million to either, I think, create a statewide submittal system. So what I do know for sure is that Alyssa is severely under-resourced. And I agree that resources are being spread out when there could be benefit to doing this bigger investment.
Yeah, and it'd really be worth knowing, like, from the reporting agencies, like what their costs are to maintain a contract with an RMS and get support, and how do they like their RMS? Is it worth the money to them? Those kinds of questions are things we should be asking.
Mm-hmm. Right, because yeah, at City of Dallas, we didn't have our own system. We just used the state system. All right, well, feel free to, yeah, if you have any other questions, or, to reach out to me if you have any other questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Catherine. I'm just going to go back to my slide deck. We're just about here at the end. And so the last thing I'm going to do is just quick couple of updates here. If anybody has anything to share, Byron touched on this a little bit. And Annalisa as well. We will be working with the Colorado Department of Transportation to get to the 2024 crash data shortly here, hopefully. Hopefully some of those minor issues can be resolved. And so we can get that, start getting that processed and make that available. So that's really the update I have. If anyone does have any contacts with those two county offices that Alyssa had mentioned, Alyssa, do you want to just put those in the chat again? That would be super helpful from any of our locals who can help make that connection.
What am I putting?
Those two counties that you're still trying to get
Oh.
the toxicology or the coroner data. Yeah, just in case anybody does have a lead. And then typically at the end of our Regional Vision Zero working group, we will do a roundtable of any updates. So if anybody does have any updates on maybe their system, what their law enforcement agency does, what they would like to see, I'd like to open the floor for a few minutes. And just go ahead and raise your hand. I do want to flag, I do see a comment in the chat from Mary in Westminster. As another transplant from Texas, I can confirm that the CRIS system is the only one I use at the two municipalities where I worked as well. It worked well for my purposes as a traffic engineer there. Okay, cool, great, thank you. All right, well, if nobody has any updates to share, I can just move us along. So thank you all for joining today. We can wrap up a couple minutes early. If you have any questions or want to talk anything about, again, the results from the workshop, or go over any of the strategies in particular, or have any other suggestions, things that weren't addressed in that final report or that workshop, please just reach out to me or Catherine. We're happy to talk crash data and trying to make improvements to the system. So just please reach out and we can give you a couple minutes back in your morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.